welcome everybody. So in preparing for reopening or complying with the various guidelines, it's important to remember the interplay between state, county, and local, which can either be a city or a municipality, mandates. So for that reason, we found it proper to take a minute to understand this intertwining. As many of you know, probably all of you know, the state has issued guidance for multiple industries, among them construction, hotels, manufacturing, and restaurants, including for dining. Not only that, but as of this morning, about 50 counties have been granted a variance to continue to reopen businesses within their jurisdictions. Yet, there are certain cities who have also issued either formal guidelines or suggestions in addition to those provided by the state and the county level. So businesses might be asking themselves, okay, so what guidance controls? Should I be following all or only some? And if only some, then which one specifically if dealing with county and city levels? So there are two main answers to this question. The short answer is you have to comply and follow the most restrictive guidelines. Now, the long answer is it really depends. It ultimately will depend on the county and the city in which your business is operating. And by this, I mean that you need to focus on your local guidance and health orders to determine exactly how these conflicts of law, so to speak, might play out. So for example, if we take a quick look at the LA County's May 29 health order, as you can see in your screens, the county's order specifically states that all businesses within the jurisdiction of the county are required to follow the county health department's guidance. However, it also provides that if a county has not provided specific guidance, then the state guidance, if there's any, should be followed. At the same time, though, the county's order explicitly provides that if your locality, such as a city or a municipality, has more stringent requirements, then the county health order does not supersede that local law. In other words, your business would be subject to the local requirements if there's any. Again, should a conflict exist, the LA County order provides that the most restrictive controls. So the point of briefly discussing this issue is to exemplify the importance of reviewing all state, county, and local rules and guidelines. For example, Anne will be discussing San Diego County in a second, and as you will see, the rules might be different and vary from county to county. So Anthony, if you can move to the next slide. The next one, please. So that was just a very quick example as to how the interplay of state, county, and local rules might play out. Now, I want to turn and take a closer look at the LA County guidelines themselves. LA County has issued industry-specific protocols and guidelines, and these include retail, which includes for in-person shopping, warehousing and manufacturing, office-based workplaces, shopping centers, hair salons and barbershops, and restaurants, which include dining as well. So there's a lot to cover within each one of these industry guidelines, and we can't possibly dive into each one of them. I do want to point out, however, that there's a lot of overlap amongst these protocols. So to the extent that there's any industry-specific guidelines, the differences are going to be subtle. But in one way or another, all protocols or guidelines include 5 major measures, which are, as you can see in your screen, include workplace policies and practices to protect employee health, measures to ensure physical distancing, measures to ensure infection control, communication with employees and the public, and measures to ensure equitable access to critical services. Now, are all of these measures mandatory? In other words, must businesses follow and incorporate every single one of them, both on paper and in practice? Technically, the order provides that these measures are mandatory, but note that to the extent that a business does not implement a measure because it might be inapplicable somehow, such businesses must be prepared to explain the failure to implement. We would encourage all businesses to try to adopt and implement all measures. As you can see, they're pretty much mandatory. Now, I will briefly highlight some of the measures in the restaurant's protocol, and that is because the guidelines for restaurants are numerous and quite stringent. So, looking at your screen, for workplace policies and practices to protect employee health, one of the requirements is that employers have to provide workers with information on either the employer or government-sponsored leave benefits that the employee might be entitled to receive. This could include either paid sick leave under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, but potentially other paid sick leaves. So this is a good time to review your legally mandated posters and internal policies to ensure compliance with the law. Now, something that we all found very interesting is that For restaurants, you have to provide facials, and all wait staff has to wear them. But not only that, they also have to wear cloth face covering in addition to the facials. Now we can move to the next slide. With respect to measures to ensure physical distancing, one of the interesting points is how many people can sit in the dining restaurant. Now, the guidelines provide that indoor and in-person dining capacity is not to exceed 60% maximum occupancy. And this is to allow for social physical distancing between the groups of customers. Now, another point that raises a little bit of a question is the number of guests that can sit at a single table. The guidelines provide that the people at the party at the same table have to is limited to no more than 6 people that should be members of one household. Now, the fact that the guidelines say that they should doesn't mean that it's necessarily mandatory, and the fact that it doesn't define what a household is either. So there's a little bit of an ambiguity as to whether perhaps people who are just friends and want to sit together are allowed to do so. So this kind of raises that particular question. Now, moving to measures to ensure infection control. If you thought that the facials and the mask was excessive, let's take a look at what's required for dishwashers. Dishwashers have to be provided with equipment to protect their eyes, nose, and the mouth from contamination due to splash using a combination of face coverings, protective glasses, and/or facials. They're also required to provide aprons, and they have to be changed frequently. Now, one of the questions that also comes up very frequently is whether the business have any discretion to refuse service. And the guidelines provide that yes, customers who refuse to wear a face cloth covering may be refused service and asked to leave. And it's ultimately up to the employer's discretion. Now, moving to communication with employees and the public, one interesting point is that employers have to put a sign that notifies customers that while it may be common practices for dinners to socialize after the meal, this will be discouraged during the pandemic. So you gotta keep your customers moving. Now, if we move to the next slide, again, I wanted to talk really briefly about the city of LA, because as I discussed at the beginning, you must also be aware of the local requirements. Now, LA City is an interesting example in the sense that it published a toolkit for businesses. Now, these are not guidelines per se, and they're intended as a supplemental information for businesses for developing their preparedness plans for reopening. Now, it does not replace the LA County public health requirements or the guidance from the state. It should be noted that this supplemental information virtually mirrors the LA County guidelines, but there are certain additional and different information that's provided by the city. And this supplemental information includes, if we can move to the next slide, Anthony, includes physical distancing, cleaning and sanitizing, employee health and personal hygiene, and facility safety. Now, I'm just going to highlight a few of the points that I thought were very relevant within each one of these. For physical distancing, within food and drink preparation environments, employers have to consider how physical distancing can be maximized. For cleaning and sanitizing, you have to consider reducing business hours for extra deep cleaning. For employee health and personal hygiene, you have to reinforce employee training on health and safety guidelines with periodic refresher trainings. So this is very important. And lastly, for facility safety, it is recommended that employers log all employees that come on premise for purposes of supporting public health contact tracing.